So I ended up selling BenCom when I was 41. I even vividly remember taking the retirement trip with my wife to say, how are we going to live this next chapter in our life? It turns out the people that bought it didn't pay as agreed and effectively destroyed the company. And so I kind of went from 41 and retired, mentally that is, to 41 and having to start all over again.
Hey, welcome back to the Accelerate Your Insurance Sales podcast. Andy Neary, CEO and founder of Complete Game Consulting. I am excited for today's episode. Today, I am joined by Mark Holland, CEO of CoVerica in Dallas, Texas. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andy. Glad to be here. And it's kind of weird hearing you say that with me being from Dallas.
Because born and raised where?
In Tennessee.
Tennessee. All right. Well, we're going to have a fun conversation here. I'm actually really excited to have the conversation because when you and I first connected, you were sharing with me offline the success you've had, the rise and fall, I guess is a really good way to say it, of two different entities you were involved with, you founded in the insurance business. Which has what has ultimately led you to the CEO role at CoVerica. And these rise and falls, these falls were really out of things that were completely out of your control. I think when people listen to this episode, they're going to be like, holy cow, this guy's gone through a lot. His perseverance is absolutely amazing. They might be sitting there going, I don't know if I would have stuck through all that. So with that all said, Mark, let's dive into it. The first business you built in the insurance business was BenCom. Is that correct?
Correct.
So walk us through building that.
I spent a little time on the career agency side and then a general agency, and then that led into BenCom.
Okay. So walk us through the growth of BenCom. You grew this thing to the point you were set up for a successful exit, but it didn't quite go the way you thought. Walk us through that story.
Yeah, so just really blessed. I've been a serial entrepreneur. I was thinking about it today. So I'm 57, and I started my first business when I was 17. So I was thinking about that today, thinking, wow, that's 40 years of entrepreneurialism. But anyway, with BenCom, so ever since I've been in this business, I never thought of it as a job. I always thought of it as a business. And so I've always thought to grow it. And with BenCom, we grew that up where we had business in about 40 states. We had 5 locations and about 3,000 commercial clients. And so I ended up selling BenCom when I was 41 and felt like that, I was going to go into semi-retirement mode because I certainly didn't think I'd ever quit working, period. But really, I thought I'd volunteer my time for Christian-based organizations. I'm big on my faith, and then also fund some of those. So I even vividly remember taking the retirement trip with my wife to say, how are we going to live this next chapter in our life? And so it turns out the people that bought it didn't pay as agreed and effectively destroyed the company. And so I kind of went from 41 and retired, mentally that is, to 41 and having to start all over again.
Well, and you shared offline that when you made the exit, or what you thought was an exit, you and your wife were already planning what the travel was going to look like, how you were going to donate to causes that you guys were passionate about, what that post-work life was going to look like, right?
That's exactly. We actually took a trip to the Cayman Islands specifically to plan what that retirement was going to look like.
Wow. What was that feeling like when you realized this acquisition isn't going to happen the way I thought it was, and going from I thought I was going to be retired to I got to find a way to build this back up? What was that feeling like?
Well, so I'd say at first it was fear. Just you're thinking, oh my gosh, I got to do this again. There were some pieces of it that were exciting in that, sometimes when you grow up a business, it's harder to change like key core things you're doing. And on the excitement part, I was able to look at it and say, okay, well, if I could start all over, what would I do different? Okay, so I had some things there. But then I leaned heavily on my faith because I do believe that God wanted me to sell. And I can't explain, why it didn't work out like we thought. But so then it was a matter of, he's always taking care of me. So, I'm just going to give it my all, and he'll open a door and close a door on how to, what the next chapter looks like.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. It is hard for some people to look at a situation, especially when it's deemed negative, to go, everything happens for a reason, right? And that faith, having that faith and conviction, even through moments like that, is so important. That if you shift that perspective from why is this happening to me to there must be a reason as to why it's happening, I think you give yourself a better chance to come out the backside a better person. Would you agree with that?
Sure. It's what is God trying to teach me in this moment? And because I can look back in my life, and I would challenge anybody to think this way. If you really think about how you got to where you are today, it's likely you had positive things that steered you in a direction and negative things that steered you in a direction. And when you start learning to look for what am I supposed to learn with this negative thing that's pushing me a direction. And I would say one of the worst things that ever happened to me in my business career pushed me to one of the best things that happened to me in my business career. And so when you can start recognizing that, it gives you a whole different perspective. It doesn't mean it's not hard, but it is you got to change your mindset to have the right thinking to essentially see what you need to see in that moment and get out of the woe is me stuff.
So is it that forced comeback from BenCom, is that what led you to found Benefit Help? Was Benefit Help the agency that came out of the phoenix that came out of the ashes of BenCom?
It was because at the time, BenCom hasn't totally taken its course. So I had like a non-compete where I couldn't use the name. And so I had an idea of the direction that was going, but I had to literally start over with nothing. And so I had to come up with a name. And so that's where Benefit Help was born. And I'll tell you, at the end of the day, for me, God made it surprisingly easy. And not to say it was easy, because it was lots of hard work, but then there were lots of great lessons in there. But Benefit Help was a great ride for me.
Yeah. And I think your message that's going to play out a lot in today's episode is faith. If you're listening to the episode, whether your faith is God, the universe, whatever that is, it's having that faith that there is a higher power bigger than you that is going to make sure you're always being protected no matter what. That's something it took me a long time to learn, Mark.
And for me, I'm big in my faith, so I don't want to come across as I'm preaching to everybody, but it's the way I feel and believe. So it's part of me.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you're talking about it, actually, because again, I think a lot of people they have faith. Sometimes they're too afraid to talk about it publicly, but I'm glad we're having the conversation. So let's go into. Now here you are with a new organization, Benefit Help, and that entrepreneurial spirit in you led you to creating a new agency, which went on to have a lot of success and scaled, right?
Yeah. So even from the first year, we showed explosive growth, hit the ground running, and the first 10 years, growth every year, and we had grown it up to where we were right at about $1.8 million of revenue. And so, I can just say I just felt totally blessed. And, the one thing I can say I did differently was keeping balance in my life. Because I'll tell you, I think one of the lessons God gave me in my first business was I had the mindset of work hard, put in all the hours you can, run hard, and get out early. And I kind of feel like God said, "Yeah, how'd that work for you?" and the lesson is in a sentence is I think God was saying, "You were so focused on the finish line, you missed the journey."
Thank you for saying that. I think there's a lot of people in the insurance industry who get into business with a finish line in mind already. I remember having a conversation with a peer of mine when I started Complete Game Consulting, and he was questioning my direction because he thought I was stupid not to start an insurance agency. Because he's like, listen, man, you start an agency right now, you grow it up to $1 million plus in revenue, you'll be able to sell it for at least 4 times the multiple of EBITDA. So he was telling me, go start an agency with the end goal and finish line already in mind. And I think what you said is so important for people to hear. This isn't about some finish line. It's about enjoying the journey. It's about enjoying the process of building a business.
And I'll tell you, at Benefit Help, there was a time where I took off for a month with no phone calls, no email. So when you think about exiting, even with 4 million, how about not exiting and making, 400,000 or 500,000 a year and not having to be that active?
Yeah.
That's a pretty nice value prop.
Well, what you talk about there is work-life integration, right? And I think that's the point I'm trying to make is if every decision you make, so go look back at BenCom, right? If I'm hearing you right, it sounds like maybe you are making decisions there more with an end in mind, the finish line in mind, versus at Benefit Help, maybe it was more about, no, I'm here to enjoy the process and the journey. I got to believe your decision making when you were trying to race to a finish line was a lot different than the decision making you're making as a leader with Benefit Help when you're just trying to build a lifestyle.
And not only for me, it was for my people. So they would actually get in trouble if they were putting in a lot of overtime. So it was just like I made a commitment to keep balance in my life, I was making them do it. And we even put some benefits in place to structure it that way. Like we wouldn't let them carry over PTO because no, PTO is designed so you have that time off to, replenish, refresh.
Yeah, that's great. So here you are at Benefit Help. Growing the book, you said, to just shy of a couple $1 million. Benefits only, correct?
Correct.
You were probably on a path of another successful exit. And then once again, the unexpected happens. Walk us through that. I think it was about a 36-month period where it felt like one punch to the gut from one to the next kept hitting you. Walk us through that 36-month period where I'm sure, again, it had to feel like a dream or a nightmare.
So, when I made the comment earlier about I got to do it all over again, what would I do different? What I learned at my time with BenCom is I liked working on larger accounts, and we were just blessed enough we were able to get those. So I made a focus at Benefit Help to do larger accounts. And really, in my mind, if we were doing something under 50, it was just practice. Otherwise, and when I say larger accounts, I'm talking about 500 to 5,000 employees. Benefit guys, we talk about everything in terms of employees. And so I had lots of accounts that paid multiple six figures. And so when the dominoes started falling, one of our larger accounts that we made multiple six figures off of got purchased, and the new people wouldn't even take my calls. And through my years of doing this, that's happened before. It wasn't the end of the day. It certainly hurts, right? But we kept ourselves financially secure enough that we didn't live beyond our means, that we could weather that storm, no big deal. So about 3 months later, another one happens. And so now I'm like, ooh, now that's your feel again, multiple six figures. Whoa, wait a minute. And this was leading right into COVID. Mm-hmm. And so one of our other clients, right as COVID started, was about 5,000 employees, and they went down to 1,500 overnight. Oh, ouch. And then another one was 500 employees that they closed their doors. Ouch. And so it started about every 2 to 3 months, one of those would fall. And so, now as I articulate that, that's starting to where, operations have to change, right? And so it was one of those things where I've all the way through that, I felt like, sometimes you lose, sometimes you gain. So maybe one of my customers is going to buy somebody, God's always provided, the next one will be something we gain. So I just kept chipping away, and it kept happening. And so we effectively went from that 1.8 over that period of time down to about 300,000, where I was actually even not only not drawing an income, but I was funding expenses out of my pocket to keep staff and that type thing.
As a leader of an organization, what's going through your head at that time? I mean, we're talking in that. What did you just do the math? You lost 1.5 million, essentially what, 80, almost 90% of the business gone. By the way, through in many ways, nothing of your doing. Acquisitions, going out of business, downsizing. And you're not the first to share this kind of story with me as an agency executive. What's going through your head?
Yeah. So for me, back to what I'd said earlier about, I always felt like God had provided. So it was really just praying about, God, what do you want me to learn in this? As well as certainly thinking, got to figure out how to get new business, and was out trying to get new business and knocking on doors there, which we did get some business. We actually ended up going down to about 220, and we grew it back up to 300. So we were on our way back up, but certainly not at the pace we were used to, right? And so through all that, it was really, I kept just leaning on my faith that, there's a lesson in there that, something I need to learn. And so I actually learned a lot. I mean, it's interesting that when things get tight, your focus gets you get more focused.
Well, and I have to believe, Mark, were there some mornings where those conversations with God were pretty tough?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it was one of those conversations that led me to CoVerica where I wouldn't have even entertained the conversation. I wasn't interested.
Talk to us about that, because here you are now twice successfully built a benefits agency and twice saw that agency fall to things, again, we could label outside your control. It would be so easy in that moment to give up. I know plenty of people in this industry that would give up at that point. And you didn't. Your faith was strong. What ultimately led to this opportunity at your lowest, when you've lost 80 to 90% of your business? What led to the opportunity for you coming on board as the CEO of CoVerica?
Well, so it was middle of the day in prayer when I just had one of those rough conversations prospecting, and just had to put my head down for a minute and pray about it. And so I had just before that cleared some messages on LinkedIn where people were in messaging me, and I got contacted all the time about, are you looking for other opportunities, or do you want to sell your agency, that kind of stuff. And so, but I wouldn't entertain any of them because I just wasn't interested. And because I just felt like he wanted me to be independent, and he's always provided. And so through that, I had just read a few LinkedIn messages, and one of which was from a recruiter. And so when I just stopped and prayed for a minute about, God, are you trying to push me somewhere else? Because I was starting to question that. It's been there for a little bit, and he came to me, or said kind of in my head, is how would you know if you're not listening? And it was right after I'd read a specific email on LinkedIn. So I just thought to myself, okay, thought I'll be obedient. I'll just reach back out to that guy and have a conversation. I really didn't think it was about a new opportunity as much as I thought it was about God wanted me to talk to that guy for some reason. And so when I connected with the recruiter, he started the conversation in a way that blew me away by saying, he said, so we're looking for somebody to run an agency in Texas. And the first qualifier is you must be a follower of Christ and believe in using your business as a ministry. And then went on to say the growth of the business and using your business as a ministry, that the founder's vision was that would be for where we could charitably contribute for to lots of things, and essentially support our people internally, externally, as well as use the profits to do good. So and then he referenced a video that he basically said, there's this video that kind of gives you an example of what we're talking about, et cetera, et cetera. And so I asked him, I said, is that video by so-and-so? And he said, yeah. And the guy's a friend of mine that's doing exactly what I wanted to do. And so I felt like there was enough there that I was like, okay, God, I think you want me to listen, explore this. And so I'll do that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. The reason I wanted you to come on was for this very reason. I think in the insurance industry, we love to put people who've had meteoric success on a pedestal. And we all want to learn from, what are they doing to create that kind of meteoric, growth. But I think there's more lessons and more power and more impact garnered from somebody who's gone through what you've gone through. because there's not a lot of people that would go through what you went through, not just once, but twice, and keep coming back for more. But I would be curious, we're going to get into what you're doing today with CoVerica here in a minute, but looking back on that journey from BenCom to Benefit Help, what are some of what's the biggest takeaway for you? What's a lesson you've learned from that journey that you still apply today as CEO of CoVerica?
Well, I'd say that's a great question. And for me, I would say it's faith first. It is also learning to keep balance in your life, because even the Bible tells us the way God built us is to have that proper balance with rest and retreat, daily prayer, even things like prioritizing your family. And so it's so easy to get in I'm going to call it the stuff of the day, to where you're sucked in and you start, then it's a 8-hour day, then it was a 10-hour day, then it's a 12-hour day, and just thinking, I got to buckle down because all this stuff's falling apart. I mean, I can relate to that one, right? So then 14-hour day, and we all have those. I'm not saying you never do it, but I am saying you keep yourself in check to say, at what point do you got to take that time off. And for me, I learned that if I would give myself margin to go home and do something with my wife, to do something with my kids, that God would make the rest of it work out. And, yes, you do have to have faith. And as you heard from my journey, it doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes it's years. But I guess that goes back to faith. And so balance would be one. And then I'd say faith first would be one, even though you only asked for one. I gave you two.
Always love more, Mark. Let's talk about CoVerica. So you're CEO of CoVerica today. 40-year-old agency in Dallas, Texas. I'm curious, historically, it's a P&C heavy agency. What would make them hire a CEO who comes from more of a benefit background, tech background? What would intrigue them to hire a guy like you as CEO when they're a P&C heavy shop?
Yeah, and I'll say that the founder here is very, very wise, and I can tell you just from having the conversations with him, he said, that guy knows business, and that guy knows how to grow a business, and because some people really they only ever do that once, right? And I've done that several times, and then he also even said, and he's had big successes and big failures. Again, can you persevere through your failures? Because we all can persevere through our successes, right? And I also remember him saying something that I thought was pretty intuitive. He said, because in talking with some of the senior leadership, we've had a chance internally to have these conversations after the fact, now that I'm here. And he told one of the other guys, when somebody was saying, he doesn't know P&C. They were like, well, we already know P&C. he knows stuff we don't know. He knows benefits, and we know we should be doing that. We just don't know how to do it well, right? And so I think it was kind of the bigger picture to say we already got the P&C expertise. We need somebody to run the business, but also a part of the business we're not great at is the benefit side. And for that matter, we have thousands with an S commercial accounts that they have not tried to approach with benefits. And so sounds like a pretty good opportunity to me.
What was that experience, that journey like of you taking the leap and joining CoVerica? Because again, you've been around for quite a while. It was not only a change of a new company, but you also had to move from Tennessee to Dallas. What was that like for you and your family? Because that's a pretty big fresh start for somebody who's been in the industry. You've been around, 20 plus years?
Yeah.
It had to be a pretty big change for you guys. And kudos to the leadership at CoVerica, because one thing I love about what you said is instead of just hiring somebody else who's going to continue supporting their strengths, they went out and they looked for somebody who was going to help improve their weaknesses.
Yeah, isn't that a great lesson in leadership, is hire your weaknesses?
We have an agency that I had a conversation with just a few weeks ago who's in acquisition mode, and they said the same thing. One of the areas of their business they want to improve is personal lines, and they're looking for agencies to acquire. And one of the things they're looking for in an agency is an agency that has a solid, streamlined, personalized process, because they want to buy an agency that's going to improve their own personal lines processes.
Yeah,
I thought that was a wise statement.
Yeah, we're in acquisition mode, and we've done a couple this year. And one of the things that I say at first is, why are we doing this? I don't want to buy a block. Are we getting people or processes or expertise that we don't have or that we need or that's going to help us? Because the block is more of an easy one. But to your question about the move, is that was a big deal for us. We were the house I lived in when I made this move, we've been in for 25 years. And frankly, I didn't think my wife or my family would move. And so a little bit of a part of that faith story about gaining confirmation. Sometimes God speaks to us in a way that is not only through us, but you get confirmation through others. And so after a couple of weeks of jumping through some hoops with them introducing me to CoVerica, the recruiters had me some hoops to jump through. I hadn't even told my wife at that time. And so the whole time they were saying, the job's in Texas, you'd have to move. And in my mind, I'm thinking, if they want me, I'll commute, whatever, and I wasn't even worried about it, And so whenever they were going to introduce me to CoVerica and bring me out here, I said, well, I better tell my wife or talk to her about it to make sure we would seriously do it, or else it's not fair for me to waste their time. And so anyway, I went to my wife, and I had told her, all about what happened and how I got connected with them and what had happened to this point. And so she says, well, in my prayer life, God has been telling me that we have been serving him all these years in our comfort zone, and it's time to serve him outside of our comfort zone. And so she said, don't really want to move, but we want to do what God wants us to do, so keep talking to him. Wow. And it turns out that and I'll just jump to the end result, is my daughter moved and my son moved, and my son and his fiance just got married here in our backyard 2 weeks ago, and they've already bought a house. So pretty cool.
I wanted to use this episode as an opportunity to share a story of somebody who has been extremely resilient. And you definitely define that. And I wanted to share that story with others who may be dealing with setbacks in their insurance career, whether they're a producer or they're in an executive position. We all deal with setbacks, but it's how we come back from those setbacks that really define who we are. So I'd be curious, when you look back on your journey, Mark, as a CEO of CoVerica today, and comparing yourself to the CEO and founder of BenCom, how would you compare and contrast Mark Holland, the CEO today, and Mark Holland, the CEO back then?
Well, you might say from young, aggressive, and conquering the world to more like grounded with some wisdom and much more thoughtful thinking, much less of I know it all, and maybe a lot more of still got a lot to learn. So, and it's been a great ride. I mean, all of those things I've learned in the highs and lows have been a great ride. And yeah, I would just say I've gotten to do so many things that are, let's say, great experiences in life. So I just feel blessed to be here and be a part of it. I love the team at CoVerica. It's been an amazing journey.
Do you think it's had a big impact? So your experience in this industry, has it had a big impact on how you handle, I don't know, tough decisions, tough calls today, just because of what you've been through? Do you think that has hardened you up in a way to be able to go through those difficult times more easily?
I do. I absolutely do. And I also think that whenever it's much more wise in the way we handle things like with employee issues and whatnot, about thinking about, here we've got a saying that we're not just interested in EBITDA, we think about the whole person. And so the decisions that we even make with our employees are not just financially driven. We have to make a profit as a business, but short of that, we also feel like, when you do the right thing for the right reasons, God provides. And so those things have worked for us. And so we're real conscious and we bend over backwards, even employees that are, let's say, not the right fit. Rather than just firing them, we help them find something that they're a good fit for.
Yeah, it may not be the wrong person, right seat, right? It could be the right person, wrong seat.
Yeah, and even if it's something, we obviously try first inside the organization, but if that doesn't work, we even help them if it's outside the organization.
Love that. I have to believe likewise, some things others might view as a big issue today, you probably don't see as much anymore. Those mountains that look like more molehills.
That's very true. Very
based on
true.
what you've been through.
And I'll tell you, especially with the youngsters that approach something going on like their sky's falling in, it's like, that's nothing.
What advice, this is more of a general question for an executive at an agency. What advice would you give another agency executive? I think one of the challenging things today running an agency is you have producers and team members that range from baby boomers to young professionals in their 20s. I don't know, was that the Gen Z generation? Which it can be hard to run a team with such a wide range of generational backgrounds. What advice would you give to another executive who also has that dynamic in their agency?
Yeah, I would say first, I think you got to understand the difference in the way the generational, all the generations think, right? And with that, I mean, certainly you got to approach each generation differently on how they think and what they even want. It's interesting. I think I've got a little bit more hope in our humanity and in our country with the youngest generation and how they think. They're less money motivated and more purpose driven. So I love that. And so I was thinking if there's anything else.
That's a good point, though, Mark. I think it's important for agency executives to understand the younger generations are driven more by purpose than profit.
Yeah, so we tend to design comp plans where they'll make more money. That's not really what they want.
Correct.
Correct. So more like something we do here is we do a lot of volunteering and charity stuff. They want to work for an organization they see is making a difference. And which is not why we do it, but it is why some of them come here, and they want to join. And like if we go serve at a soup kitchen or whatever that is, they want to be on that team that goes and does it. This past weekend, I had the privilege of delivering a big check to one of the organizations we support. They want to be there, volunteering side by side, seeing the big check, watching the impact it makes with the organization.
Yeah, that's great. I think you're absolutely right. With the younger generations coming in, they're not motivated by money necessarily. They're motivated by mission. And I think for any agency executive listening to this episode, it's not, before you get the pay structure right, get your company's mission statement right.
I totally agree with that.
Because this new generation coming in isn't necessarily going to be motivated by another zero on their paycheck. They're going to be motivated by why you guys exist.
Well, and I'll tell you this too. They're going to look at basically you need to understand the persona you put out on the public web, because that's the only thing everybody's going to Google your company, look at your website, check out the social media. And so based on what they see there, that's what they are going to have the conclusion of before you even talk to them.
What advice would you give another executive out there? When you think about the producers in any agency, you really have three levels of producers, or three types of producers. You have unvalidated, newer producers. You've got a large swath of validated who could be performing at all different levels. And then you've got those few inside an agency that we could label their all-stars. Those are the producers that are probably generating 80% of the business right now, and they're the producers they can't afford to lose. They need different types of support. What advice would you give another agency executive or sales leader out there who has that mix, which is every agency? How can they better support their producers who operate at different levels?
Well, I guess understand where they are and, build a plan to tackle each one of them. So like the what we call legacy producers, the ones that have been here forever, have big blocks of business. And I guess one thing you need to recognize too, by the way, is if you rode the bell curve going up with the legacy producers growing, it will never persist. It'll always level off, and it'll always level off and come down a little bit. So you've got to be constantly recruiting and adding people. But with that being said, the way I look at the legacy producers is not approaching it with a hard line, do this or else. I think those guys, it's really more like you want to trickle stuff to them to help them, let them know you're there. And occasionally you trickle something they see value in. Often you trickle stuff that they don't want to be a part of. That's okay. So I like to say, leave them alone and grow around them. But at the same time, try to help them grow and be there for them. So, they feel supported and don't want to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I look at it, the word that I think ties all producers together is time. When you're unvalidated, you have a lot of time, right? Because you're new. So you've got a lot of time to sell. So it's what activities are you putting in that time you have? When you become validated, the only way to scale is to use your time well, to manage your time. And then at some point, when you are one of the more successful producers in an agency, it's about how do you utilize the lack of time you have? Because you're going to hit a book of business where you're managing as much as you're selling. So with that limited time you have, what are you doing to continue to grow your brand so you can keep growing your book? And
we're trying to encourage our legacy producers to mentor. And
nice.
It's a fairly new thing, and so we don't have it mastered yet, but we certainly want to do that. And so something we do here to kind of incentivize everybody in the food chain is that we're an employee-owned company. And so we're trying to reiterate the message that we win together, right? So regardless of your position, service-wise, or any level of sales, that you're a shareholder, and if you want to see shareholder value grow, then we need to grow our people. So.
How would you describe a producer of the future who's going to win in 2030? What is it going to take for a producer to win from here moving forward?
Boy, I would say understand the tech. And I think you got to be a great marketer, which I would say marketer / prospector. But here's the thing, as a business owner, think about all the noise. I would challenge any of you guys that's been a business owner out there to think about how often you get solicited for something. So like for me, I easily get 50 calls a day between calls, emails, LinkedIn, easily 50 a day. And so if you think about that for a minute, why are you going to be any different if you're calling on business owners? Why would you be any different? And so I think you got to have a persona online to be that subject matter expert. And so it's going to take some online activity, but of course, every person you're marketing to may not, be aware of online. But so I'd say mastering the tech. I think AI is certainly going to play a role in it. And that's part of mastering the tech. Because you got to learn to get in front of people on a favorable basis. And, if you're doing speaking engagements, subject matter expert, publishing good content that your audience wants, that kind of stuff, in my opinion, will drive the B2B marketers. Now, B2C, like a personal lines, that's going to be different. That's more transactional and quick, although I think it'll be a similar thing, just at a lot bigger pace, a lot faster pace.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think in the B2B space especially, we've all been taught how to reach out to people who don't know us cold. We've been taught how to reach out to people who already know us and like us and can send us business, leads, and referrals. The one that we don't leverage enough is what are you doing to get more people to know you exist? And that's where that awareness comes in. Social media, email, things like that, speaking. It's building, getting more people to know you exist and know you is going to be a very important piece of prospecting moving forward. One more question, Mark, and then we're going to dive into a little hot round of quick hits to get to know Mark Holland, if you're okay with that.
Okay.
If there is an agency leader or heck, a producer tuning in right now, and they have experienced the highs and lows, maybe they're in a very low period right now, coming off a terrible year, what advice would you give them? You are a shining example of resilience, and you've been knocked down on a couple of occasions. You've gotten up, dusted yourself off, used your faith to keep going and persevere. What advice would you give somebody else who's going through a low moment right now and they're in this industry where they might even be questioning whether or not this is for them?
Well, I'd say, it's not the end, right? So think about and again, I have to pull it back to God and, what's God trying to teach you in this moment, and be in tune and aware of not just the woe is me, but what's going on in life, and maybe something negative is trying to push me over here to something positive. So get out of your box, think a little differently. Don't overwhelm yourself with putting in 18-hour days or 16-hour days. You got to have time to rest and retreat. So you got to have something to get your mind out of work gear.
Yeah. Great advice. Great advice. It's be clear, step back, don't outwork the situation. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, there you go.
Putting 18 hours in a day isn't going to solve the problem. But yeah, get grounded, get clear, get strong in your faith, whatever your faith is, and proceed as appropriate. That's great advice. Well, you ready for a quick lightning round to get to know Mark Holland?
Okay.
I'm a big believer in habits and rituals, Mark. So I love to ask these questions to my guests just to give our audience a chance to get to know you a little bit. So question number one, they're not hard, I promise. What does your morning routine look like? I'm a big morning routine. What does Mark Holland's morning routine look like?
So I typically just get up and do a cup of coffee, and I've got it limited to one cup of coffee. And then I'll get dressed and get into the Word. So I spend time with God every day, and which, by the way, I hadn't missed a day in almost 10 years. And so from there, I have, since my move, prior to my move, I was in the process, I'd go exercise. Ever since my move, I'm trying to create that new routine of how to work the exercise in. So I'll have to pause that one. It'll be one of those personal commitments to get the exercise back in. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it first thing in the morning, but I got to figure out where to get that in. So for that matter, a new thing for me here in Texas that I'm getting used to is my drive. So I've got a 35-minute drive to work. And so again, that's kind of changing around my routine. And outside of that, I typically am the first one in the office, so I start early. I usually get up at 4.
I love that. Early risers, get your best thinking done at the beginning of the day.
Yeah, so and I do take a little time to, let's say, reflect on the to-do list, but that's after time with the Lord.
I like that. Well, question 2 is going to let you start your routine. I'm a big believer in movement. So if you had an hour to exercise, what is your exercise of choice?
So generally, it's been brisk walking. So I used to run, but as I've gotten older, it was getting hard on my knees. And so I was walking 5 miles a day before I moved to Texas. And even here, so we have a workout facility in the office, and we have a trainer that comes to the office. So
nice.
Once a week, I've been seeing the trainer and getting a strength routine going. But I need to pick that up. And so again, it hasn't been consistent because I'm doing it in the middle of the day. We have the locker room and shower and all that here. But I'm a believer in trying to 10,000 steps a day is what I want to get done.
I love that. If you had an afternoon to yourself and it doesn't include exercise, where would I find you?
That's a good question.
And it can't include work. Cannot include work.
Yeah, I totally wasn't even thinking about work. I would say I'd love to have an afternoon on the golf course, or I'm a big car buff, so I have a convertible Corvette, riding the Corvette, doing a car show.
Awesome. You get a lot more warmer days down in Texas to do that.
Right.
A couple more questions. Books or podcasts? Any good books or podcasts you've read lately that you could share with our audience?
Oh, so the good book would be Good to Great. And I'm trying to remember the author.
Oh, it's is that Lencioni?
Yeah. No, it's not Lencioni. It's right on the tip of my mind. Anyway.
Right there. Jim Collins.
Yeah, Jim Collins. There you go. And I'll tell you, I thought I had read it. And I was doing a little team deal here with my leadership team. And so it was an assignment. And so I thought I was just going to breeze through as a refresher. And I had not read it, heard about it all the business life, but very good. And so a couple light bulb moments.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for jumping on the show today. If a producer, another executive in the industry was inspired by your story today and wanted to reach out, maybe it's another future team member of yours, what would be the best and easiest way to get in touch with you?
Shoot me an email, and I assume somewhere in this you can put my email, but it's just mark.holland@coverica.com. And we are looking for people to join the team that are looking for that balance or acquisition. So I'd love to talk to you.
That's great. Well, Mark, it's been an honor to have you on the show. Like I said, I wanted to have you on because you are a shining example of resilience. And at a time where, as a society, I don't think we have a ton of it. I wanted people to hear this story because if it just inspires one person who might be in a situation right now where they're feeling low, maybe they're questioning if they want to be in this industry, they've experienced a down year. I wanted to use this story as an example to light that flame to keep them going, and I think you did that. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, and I would even say if there is a person like that out there, shoot me an email and let's schedule a call. Happy to talk to you.
That's great. Mark Holland, everybody, CEO of CoVerica.
Thanks, Andy.
Be good.